All right, we're going to get started. If you have a seat, please. So it's my pleasure. Good evening. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this fantastic event tonight. On behalf of the New School, I am Mary Watson, Executive Dean of the Schools of Public Engagement. And this is an amazing venue and experience to talk about the connection between well-being and health for young children, and the notion of attachment and therapeutic methods to actually help advance their progress in their early lives. So I'm very pleased to have the chance to open this event. This event tonight is sponsored by Equity for Children, one of the, dare I say, the gems of the New School, led by our dear colleague Alberto, a small innovative program that's working to eradicate child poverty through advocacy, civic accountability, and using data to influence policymaking. And also the Center for Attachment Research. Howard Steele is here representing that center, who will speak in a minute. And this is located at the New School for Social Research, working with attachment theory as connected to clinical and developmental research in terms of children, their families, and their development. So the New School was founded nearly 100 years ago. In 2019, we'll celebrate our centennial. And this is a very interesting moment to reflect on what the New School has meant over 100 years and what it will mean for the next 100 years. As some of you may know, the New School was founded in 1919 as an alternative to conventional higher education, dedicated to the principles of activist scholarship that mattered in the world, to open access to learning and lifelong learning spaces, and to the creation of a civically engaged populace committed to peace and justice and equality. It was 1919, which was around the World War I period, and there were some very difficult political landscape times, rising fascism, the rise of nationalism and identity politics. Columbia University, where the founders of the New School moved from to found our university, had asked faculty to sign a loyalty oath agreement during the war, so there were a lot of complicated social and political dynamics at the time. When I used to tell that story, it used to sound like that time was a long time ago. And yet, if you actually pause in this moment and ask yourself, what are the pressing moments of 2019, some of those themes sound very similar, don't they? And so we're asking ourselves in this moment of time, what kinds of new areas are we going to be developing? What does education mean in this moment? Who should be educated? The New School has done a great job of opening up access to women, to those who identify as Jewish, to individuals who span the life course. So who are the new learners in the learning communities of 2019 is one of the questions that we're asking. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Mindy Fullilove in the front row here, who is leading out a project at the New School called 400 Years of Inequality, which looks at 400 years ago as at the founding of Jamestown and the landing and sale of the first slaves in this part of the world, and looking at inequality over those 400 years. And so that project, which is also going to come to culmination next year, is really asking who's learning, what's fair, whose economy is it, whose world is it, and how do we create justice in the context of all of that. So we're going to solve that tonight only for children, not for the entire world, but it is certainly my pleasure to be here tonight and to open this event. This event, as you know, includes speakers from a variety of disciplines and backgrounds, but all of them have had their work shaped in some way by Salvador Minuchin and his practice. Salvador was a leader in and was deeply committed to family therapy, and also its connection to social justice. Structural family therapy took root in part because of his work with so-called delinquent boys and impoverished families in Philadelphia and New York. And at the time, many of his contemporaries, these contemporaries in the 50s and 60s, considered that his patients were clinically unreachable. An Argentine-born Jew, Sal championed the underclass at a time when psychotherapy was largely reserved for the well-to-do. So tonight I hope we'll hear about who psychotherapy is for today. So now let me thank you and present Howard Steele, Professor of Psychology and Co-Director of the Center for Attachment Research at the New School, who will take us to the next phase. Welcome.
Thank you, Mary, and welcome, everyone. I'm very pleased that the Center for Attachment Research is co-sponsoring this evening with Equity for Children. I've been at the New School 14 years, and I'm discovering gems of activity and people. Alberto I've known just this year, and meeting some of his students. When I came here 14 years ago, it was from London, England, where I had been studying and working for 18 years. When I arrived in England, I had the good fortune of meeting John Bowlby and working with him for the last 5 years of his life as he advised myself and Miriam Steele on the doctoral work we were doing on intergenerational patterns of attachment. Bowlby's life is kind of in tandem in a way with Salvador Minuchin, these towering figures whose lives span most of the 20th century. And Bowlby is recognized widely as having written the first paper on family therapy. In 1949, he published a paper titled On the Reduction of Tension in the Family Group. And in it, he said that there's untold value in listening to the story that the parent tells, mother, father tells about their family history, and how this has an enormous influence on child well-being in the present moment. And I would say that I've spent most of my career working with that idea, having used in my doctoral research in the late 80s the adult attachment interview, which asks about childhood, family experiences as far back as you can remember through the age of 12. And then there's some questions at the end of the interview. Why do you think your parents behaved the way they did? Do you think childhood has an influence on who you are today? The interview is audio recorded, transcribed verbatim, and the speaker who can remain balanced, coherent, and valuing of attachment in response to those interview questions is well poised to be an effective, loving family leader. Somebody who manages responsibility for the care of children, whether they are birth children, adopted children, children in foster care, whether the parent is someone who kind of resembles the traditional family. There are very few parents who do that these days. Many families are led by gay and lesbian parents. And in all these circumstances, if the parent is organized, balanced, valuing of attachment, their children are going to thrive. We have a lot of discussion in the psychology department at the New School for Social Research about how can we better serve underrepresented groups. And there is no more a disadvantaged and underrepresented group than young children. They lack power. They're sometimes annoying. And we know that child maltreatment children in the first 2-3 years of life are most vulnerable to maltreatment. So one of the main activities at the Center for Attachment Research has been the development of a multifamily therapy. We call it group attachment-based intervention, where we work with families. Initially, it was in the Bronx. And these are typically African American and Latino families, some white families as well. They share a circumstance of poverty and a history of trauma. These families, when we first studied them 12 years ago, we thought of them as the children from the crack cocaine epidemic who'd grown up against that phenomenon, had maybe lost 1 or 2 children to protective custody, and the children were in foster care, but now another child had appeared and they wanted another chance. So we studied that intervention. It's quite intensive, meets 3 times a week over 6 months, and have shown that it's remarkably effective in terms of family preservation and promoting a more secure parent-child relationship. Like you would expect from a family therapy approach, it's been validated. It's much more useful and central than treatment as usual, which is a parenting group. You get parents together for 10 weeks, meet once a week, talk about anger management and social learning principles, perhaps about a few other things. And you get a certificate at the end, which satisfies the family court to keep you with your child. But the families we work with, they say they could paper the walls with the certificates they have, and that they're finding family therapy, the kind of thing that Salvador Minuchin advocated, much more valuable. Now, actually, there's a book that I've edited with Miriam Steele called Handbook of Attachment-Based Interventions on the table at the back. And there's some family therapy approaches articulated in that book, as well as a chapter I've written about our group attachment-based intervention. But now I want to get more deeply into the program. I want to introduce the next speaker. That is Emma Yenijovic.
Pretty good.
It's okay.
Emma is an international consultant and trainer in systems and family therapy. She's a visiting faculty member at many institutions within the U.S. and internationally. She was a longtime collaborator of Dr. Salvador Minuchin, with whom she worked for over 25 years. She's a founding member of the Minuchin Center here in New York and was its director of training for many years. So, Emma, thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. We'll just have it here. Okay, is this okay? Okay, that was the story of my life in the States. Emma Henikovic. Nobody can pronounce that, okay? So I didn't realize coming here I should have changed that. That's the last name. My grandparents went from Russia to Buenos Aires, Argentina. So it's a Jewish last name with a Spanish pronunciation. Well, I'm glad to be here, and it's a pleasure to see all of you, and also to connect with my colleagues all over the world that they are looking at us now. So I was just thinking that today this idea started with my friend Alberto Minuchin. We were just having lunch and decided out of our love for Sal and out of respect for him that we would like to do something together. And so this is how this came about, and I'm glad that we are all here, and I'm sure that Sal would have been pleased to see all of you, because it's not only about family therapy. This is about his legacy, about working with children and poor and marginalized families. And this is one aspect that I think it's very important in Sal's work, and was a motor in his work, a motivator. But Sal is known mostly for the development of a model called structural family therapy. So I think it's important for all of us to be here. So let me tell you how we are going to do this together. This is a working collaboration. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about who Sal was for me and who he was himself and his work. And then we will have a panel of 5 people talking about Sal's influence and their work now, and then we will have hopefully 45 minutes for questions and answers. That's the idea. So this is not an easy presentation for me, because this is about Sal, who he was and what he represented for me. So not easy to think about what I wanted to talk. Usually people that know me, I just walk around, I talk, I connect, it's easy for me. Now, just in case, I have all these pages in front of me, okay? That's not my usual style. So I will start. I remember now that Sal used to say that people nowadays talk more about family therapy techniques and less about who they are as people. And so he used to tell us a lot of anecdotes about his colleagues, how he met them, who they were as people. He was very curious. He was a very curious person. He connected with other people. And he thought that was more important than learning about techniques. So I'm going to talk about who Sal was for me, my relationship with him, and his work. And some of you know I met Sal in Mexico from Argentina. I went live in Mexico, and he came there. We were a small group of family therapists, all working with what we thought was structural family therapy. We were very proud of that, so invited Sal to spend the week with us. So in my usual style, I am a risk taker. I decided, okay, here I have a videotape with this family interview, I'm going to show it. I showed it, I finished, and Sal was very nice and said, Emma, that's very nice, but it doesn't have anything to do with structural family therapy. I started to learn about Sal. That's what he used to call stroke and kick. So he said, nice, but do something with that. That's not enough. He challenged me, and Sal was a challenger, and that's how the relationship, at least with me, was, and with most of the people, always with tension, always with challenge. But he also presented there his work with poor families. In Argentina, in Mexico, I was already working with poor families, but I was impressed, and I fell in love with him, well, with his way of working. I just couldn't believe the way in which he was working and how he connected, and his commitment to work with social justice. That was very important for me. So I made a decision, if one day I'm lucky enough to come to the States, I wanted to study with Sal. Well, it happened, this was at the beginning of 82, 83, March 84, I came to New York. So please, people, go back, 1984. Try to picture me, much younger if you can, no internet, and I'm here in New York trying to connect with Sal, called Philadelphia Child Guidance Clinic. He was not there anymore, he was already in New York. Finally, I was able to get his number. So my goal of coming to New York, called Sal, try to study with him. So the next day, after I arrived, I called him. And because I was very moved by his work in Mexico, I gave him as a gift a record with a very famous singer, Amparo Ochoa. So I said, Sal, this is Emma, I gave you a record. And he said, well, I have the record, but I don't remember you at all. Okay, I think you are getting the gist of Sal's style. But I said, Sal, I would like to talk with you, I want to study with you. And he was very nice. He invited me to his place, and I went. He was in the village, and I met there his wife, Pat Minuchin. So, and Pat was a big, big collaborator of Sal, and afterwards I worked together with Pat also. So I spoke with Sal, and he said, Emma, I am starting here a group with family therapists because I want to change here agencies, institutions, systems. I really want to help them to think more in terms of families. But you just came, you don't have a job, so you cannot be part of my group. Well, I don't know if you know the story, but after yes, no, I challenged him, he accepted me. So I was part of that group. I started to work, and he helped me with that in a clinic in the Lower East Side, Roberto Clemente Clinic. And he trained me then, and he trained all of us as supervisors. The idea was from here, you go to an institution and you help people to think that we are all human beings and we are part of a family. And after that, Sal asked me to become a faculty member at what was then Family Studies. So this was March 1984. That's when my relationship with Sal Minuchin started. And it ended 1 week before he died. I was able to talk with him, I called him, he answered. I think it was 9:30, he was asleep, I woke him up, but he answered, he spoke with me. And in my way, I was able to say thank you and goodbye. So I'm very happy that I was able to say that. But I'm still very connected with Sal. In my head, in my heart, I'm always having conversation with him because he is my major professional influence. He changed my life. I thought I was a family therapist. I started as a psychoanalyst. I thought then I was a family therapist, but the way in which he worked, his approach, being a system thinker, changed my way of working and connecting with people. It was not only at the professional level, it's also at the personal level, and changed my worldview. And since then, I have been working with children, families, and at family studies. In those days, Sal used to teach in the morning, lunchtime, and I have some of my colleagues here. We used to meet at lunchtime, the entire faculty, to talk about the projects we were involved. Because teaching was one aspect. The other one was we need to change the systems that work with families. And I will tell you why afterwards. But we developed a large, big project in foster care. We work with teenagers that were pregnant, women that abuse drugs, people that were involved with the court, women living in shelters, welfare families, I think I said, many, many different projects. So in those faculty meetings was Pat and Sal, both of them together, and we were just exchanging ideas, saying, well, we will go here, there, and then so it was a pleasure, it was an exciting time, and we tried to change the systems, and I cannot say that we were very successful, but some of us are still trying. We keep trying. So Sal, as I said, always was a challenger, but he always surprised me because he always looked at things from a different perspective. He always thought out of the box. So you never knew where he was going to come from. So he said that because in one of he always said, well, because I was an immigrant, I learned how to accept and deal with uncertainty. So he dealt, okay, with uncertainty, but he made you uncertain all the time, okay? Because, okay, what is he going to say now? What's going to happen? Salas, I was born, as most of you know, in Argentina, in a small town. Being a Jew there was not easy. He felt discriminated. He became a fighter, a rebel, and an outsider. Then he went as an immigrant to Israel. Then he became an immigrant when he came here to New York. He started to work with African American and Latino families in the 50s at Wilwick School. He started to work there, and he said, he used to say that those families taught him a lot about injustice, about discrimination, about poverty. And he always talked about how he took with them a position of, I don't know. And when you say, I don't know, people want to teach you. So he always entered from a very curious position. As I said, he was a very curious person, and he was also very respectful of people. So he was a challenger, a rebel, a revolutionary. What Sal brought, he was the first person that started to work with welfare families, and he started to write about this. Nobody, as we heard before, they were saying you cannot work. Poor families are not apt for therapy. You cannot help them to change. So Sal was a challenger. He challenged the systems. He was a revolutionary. He started to look at the individual in the context of the family. The individuals, we, all of us, who we are, our identity is connected with everybody else in the family. We are not alone. So the problem is not inside you, the problem is relational. If we change the relationship, things will change. He believed that people have resources, people have strength, so he will enter looking for strength, for resources, not for pathology. This was revolutionary. We were used, and still are used, to look at pathology, problems, and not strength and resources. And then he looked at the family in the context of society, and how all the institutions will impinge on the family and create a lot of stress. There are a lot of services available to work with poor families, very well-intentioned, but in general, the idea still is, let's save the child from this family. We need to rescue the child. We need to save them, instead of looking for resources in the family. Sal used to say, families create problems, but families have the solutions. So he was working, looking always with helpers inside the family. The idea is that he was not, even though he was the expert, we need to work in collaboration. So it was not entering from a hierarchical position, I'm going to tell you what to do, is I'm going to find out what are your resources. We are going to do this together. Families have problems and there is pathology, but we need to remember also that people love each other, they will change for the other. We change for the other. There are issues of loyalties and respect. If we look for them, we can use them as a resource, and that's our position. Don't remove a child, don't remove an adult for the family. Look who else is there, who can help. So I was going to talk more about what I am doing today with this, but okay. I want to show you Sal and his work. So we are going to see a brief segment. This is a videotape. I mean, we can continue talking forever, but this is a small segment of a consultation that Sal did, and it's clearly emblematic for him and his work. So it was a consultation in a hospital where there was a child that has been hospitalized there for 1 year. First, he will interview the psychologist, the social worker, the psychiatrist, and then you will see the small, short interviews, his comments, and then when he works with the family. So the workers are saying the problem is inside the child. We are trying to help him to control himself. He cannot control his impulses. And you will see how he will turn this around totally, showing the workers that are behind the one-way mirror that, well, you need to look at this child in the family context and what are the resources that the family has. So it's a completely new way of looking at the problem, okay? So are we ready? Where are you? So there are blanks in between, very short ones, okay? It's edited.
Total system, that means the hospital. I enter into a consultation thinking that the consultee is the total system, that means the hospital, the treatment team, and the family. And the consultation is about their fit. So I started trying to get an idea of who is Peter from the perspective of the members of the team. Can we create an image of Peter so that I can see it? I have never seen him. What can you tell me about Peter? See, if it would be possible, not what you had written, so that I get a feeling of who is that little boy.
He's very intense, and when he's being restrained, he has a lot of charm, but he will explode at the slightest provocation.
He's very anxious. He has a lot of fears, and sometimes, for example, when he first came here, for a long time he wouldn't leave his room at night, and when he had to go to the bathroom at night to urinate, instead he would urinate all over his room. He was also unable to go to school at all until this September. He couldn't spend more than 5 or 10 minutes in class.
More and more despairing, because the view that I was eliciting was a despairing view. Is he on medication?
Yes. The ADHD got first attention when he was younger. He's had Ritalin trials in isolation. They ended up there with a combination of 40 milligrams of Ritalin, 60 milligrams of Mellaril, and 3 milligrams a day of clonidine. With the aggression and the attentional problems as the target symptoms. We then tried him on tricyclics. He's presently tricyclic antidepressants. He's presently at the upper end of the range of therapeutic dose for adults. Recently, toward the end of December, began him on co-pharmacy of lithium with the antidepressant. He's presently getting 600 milligrams a day. We're a long way, I would say, from expecting self-control in a home situation that can still destabilize independent of Peter, and which destabilizes Peter when it does.
What's Peter's future?
Hopefully.
Well, you know him better than anybody else. You had been in contact with him for a year, daily. So what, if you need to make a prediction, what would you say? Another year here?
In terms of the time here, I hope it's going to be even less than a year. That's hard to tell. He's made a lot of improvements on one hand. On the other hand, he's still unable to control these violent impulses.
Here we have a 10-year-old child, and the prognosis is a prognosis of continuous institutionalization that create disruption. And I think that the hospital need to be looked in terms of what is the context that we create for children. Is the context something that maximizes strength, increases possibilities, or do we create a hothouse for pathology? And I think frequently we create an hothouse environment where we look at pathology and pathology flourishes. Very, very close. Crystal and Kristen, okay. And how old is Kristen?
Kristen? 2.
Two. Uh-huh. Okay. So you have, how many sisters do you have? Two?
I have 3 other sisters.
Eh?
3 other sisters.
3 other sisters.
Yeah.
Do you know the name, Peter? The name of your aunt?
Marty, Elsie, and Carmen.
Uh-huh. So, 3. And do you have brothers?
No.
Okay.
No brother.
You know, this is a therapy in which I am mapping possibilities. So I first talked with the boy, and talking with the boy, I am making a psychiatric diagnosis of a 10 years old. How does he think? How does he reason? His ability to respond? Does he have focal attention? How distracted he is? All the kind of things that we are supposed to know about children. Then I am in contact with all other family members, and I make contact and I assess them in relation to me. Then I put them in contact with each other. The boy with the mother, the boy with the father, the different way in which the father responds, how different is his response to mother. Do you know why is Peter here?
Well, I heard, it was an interview, but I don't know much about, I don't know much about the reason why he's here.
I've been the one mainly involved with Peter's hospitalization.
And why, Peter? How tall are you? Uh-huh. Why are you here, Peter? I am surprised to find you here.
Because I have problems.
Eh?
Because I have problems.
You have problems. And why isn't Carmen here? No, Lisette. Why isn't Lisette here? Why are you here and not Lisette? You know,
I don't know.
it's not an interesting question.
Yeah.
Yeah, why shouldn't Lisette be here?
She's better than me, right?
Is she? Lisette, why aren't you here? And Peter is here. Is it that you're better than he is?
Not really.
Huh?
Not really.
Not really. Mrs. Garcia, why is Peter here? Peter, actually, you should ask your mom, why are you here? You know, she
Why are you here? Why am I here?
Well, you are here because you have you still have problems. You had a lot of problems dealing with school. You had a lot of problems with me. He just wanted to do things his way.
No, you talk with him. I
Okay. Okay. And I really came to the point where I couldn't handle you being home. Do you understand what I'm telling you?
But
And
it seemed to me that you're saying he's here because you cannot handle him.
that's one of the reasons.
Why aren't you here?
Excuse me?
Why aren't you here?
Why aren't I here?
Yeah. Why is Peter here?
Well, I don't know about that.
Peter, what do you think about that idea?
Huh?
What do you think about this idea that if mommy cannot handle you, she should be here?
She should.
I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know either.
Uh-huh.
You think I should be here?
No.
Why not?
I have to say everything now.
As the mother begins, she is tentative and she is uncertain because the mother doesn't have contact with this child. And she knows that other people know better. She probably expects me to do something. The child has a temper tantrum, the child is acting as if he doesn't respond. Please, doctor, do something. I think that a psychiatrist is too highly trained to begin to do things like that. That's the function of parents. See, the question is that Peter will be here for a long time if you cannot handle him. So there are two reasons why he's here. One of them is, can you handle him? Are you ready to take him home?
Well, I don't know about that, because
yeah?
sometimes when I have taken him on passes, he has improved in a lot of ways.
Uh-huh.
And now sometimes he's just like this. He doesn't want to listen to me,
Yeah.
and he doesn't want to respect. And I explain to him why he has to do this, why he has to do that, and he just...
But he did just listen to you. You said he cannot take off the mic, and he wanted to do it, but he didn't.
Yeah, sometimes he does.
So,
yeah, I mean, it has gotten a lot better since when I put him...
you see, I am a strange person, and I think strangely. So I want to ask you something.
Uh-huh.
You said that he gets upset and that you cannot handle him. And then you said that he has improved.
Yeah.
And now I will ask you a tricky question. Did you improve as well? You see, because it's a two-way street, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is how you and Peter get along.
Yeah.
So as soon as you can take care of him, they will be ready to release him to you. I think it's important to understand what's going on between you and Peter, because if that changes, if you and Peter change, Peter will change. So try to help Peter to understand that he will come home at the point in which you two can deal with each other. I am giving to the mother a concept, that the concept of Peter's problem in the hospital is a problem of fit between him and her, and that his change requires her change. Once I establish that this is what I think the problem is, then I recede.
Okay.
That's a strange, it's a different way of thinking, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
But it's I think you're right to the point, because it does have to do with me and him.
Yeah.
You know, we have, I don't know what to call it, a communication problem or what it is.
Matilda?
Okay, thank you. Okay. Yeah, so I wanted to see the theory in action. Meaning this is, as you saw, the father, I didn't say anything about that. The father was coming out of a psychiatric hospitalization. He was mentally ill, so that's why he wasn't aware totally of what was happening with Peter. But you saw how an individual problem was transformed in a relational problem. And very clearly, if the child is going to get better, it's going to get better not from inside only, but because the mother is going to do something different. It's because the relationship is going to change. And as I said before, in families, we change for the other. I believe in that. He didn't have to convince me, Sal, about this, because being a mother, I know that we change out of love for our children. So I enter thinking that this way, I enter working this way. We have a responsibility because we become part of the system we work with. What you saw is Sal, the consultant, saying something that had an impact on the mother, on the child, on the father, on the workers. So he was doing something to them, and they were doing something to him. So we elicit responses from people. We need to be aware that we are, as Sal used to say, the instrument that help people to change. So if we believe that people don't have resources, don't have strength, there is only pathology, there are only problems, we will find them. And people are very nice, and they will expand on that and give us more of that. But if we look for strength and resources, we will also find them. It's a different attitude. It's a different way of connecting with people. And I was I'm glad that you were able to see Salvador Minuchin, his way, work, and his explanations. And I want to share very briefly, I was doing yesterday a consultation at an agency. And they work with teenagers, and this is a community program where the girls have been labeled as having mood disorders. So they don't remove physically the girls that are teenagers from the home, but there is another interesting way in which we can remove children from their homes. The workers start to work with this girl, the intake. The girls will come accompanied with somebody, a family member. So, but they sit down with a family member and the girl, and the way in which they start asking questions is about when did you start to have this problem? What are your problems? Are you into drugs? Mother or father or an auntie sitting there, totally invisible, doesn't exist. And the connection is totally around the problem. They don't look for strength. And after that, the family is not included. The worker calls the school and speaks with a teacher. If there is a therapist involved, with a teacher. So this is another way in which they are helping the girl to disconnect from the family instead of helping her to connect, because the problems, what's going on with the girl, the mood disorders have to do with relationships in the family. And they are not using the family as a resource. They are creating distance. But they are working with families, and these are very good people. Once in a while, they will have dinners at a community center where they will invite families. And sometimes they wonder why not many families come to these events. Well, why will they come? They don't see what's the purpose. So the girls are not removed physically from the family, but they are disconnected from the family in a different way. I am there trying to change this culture, not easy. So I will finish this part by just saying, Sal used to say that working in the States with social systems is an exercise in failure. And we keep trying, and we keep trying, and we keep trying. And that's why we are here, because hopefully all of us will keep trying. So, well, thank you. This is the first part, and now we will go to the panelists. Okay. So I invite the panelists to sit down here. Oh. Yeah, thank you. I just need my glasses. Or not. Just sit down wherever, okay.
We'll figure out afterwards. No, you need one.
There is one there. There are plenty for everybody. Okay. So let me just say the same question for everybody, the first one. And there is one specific. And there is one specific for each one, okay? And this first one is the question I'm going to ask is how Salvador Minuchin's thinking and work influence whatever you are doing today, your work today, your practice today. So it's Salvador Minuchin's influence on your work today. So that's the first question. So let me see. Okay. Mindy, it's okay if I start with you? Please. Oh, I have to introduce Mindy. Sorry, people. No. I have a brief sentence here, and then, yeah, I'm doing my best. Okay. I'm sorry. No, but I will just say that Mindy fully love, did I say it okay? Okay, is a board-certified psychiatrist who explores the ties between environment and mental health. For the past 30 years, Mindy has been investigating how broken connections between different sections of cities harm public health and explores ways to reconnect them. And you just can, the rest of it, you introduce yourself, okay? Because it was a long, too many things to say about you, so just.
Thank you very much. Hello? Yeah. So as mentioned, I'm a psychiatrist, and I work here at the New School as a professor of urban policy and health. So and one of the courses I teach is political economy of the city. So it's possible I'm the only psychiatrist in the United States who's teaching political economy of the city. So people are always surprised and they say, well, how'd you get from psychiatry to there? And so the answer is that I was working in my residency in the South Bronx at a place called Morrisania Neighborhood Family Care Center. I see some people nodding. And so quite a number of people who had studied with Sal Minuchin at the Philadelphia Child Guidance Center had established a really groundbreaking clinic where they really changed the system. They said the whole fabric of this mental health center should be around family therapy. And I went there in my last year of residency to learn family therapy. And all of our work was in front of a one-way mirror. And we worked with all kinds of families and all kinds of problems. So the great influence of it was that process of learning to see the system of the family, and get some kind of idea of how do you help the family shift the system enough that they could breathe a little. And I think that it was very exciting work. Then I was in San Francisco. I went to San Francisco, and it was the beginning of the AIDS epidemic. And I got a job studying the AIDS epidemic. And it turns out that the AIDS epidemic was spreading in the United States because of horrific urban policies directed principally at poor communities, and certainly at Black and Hispanic communities. And as I began to see the process of the epidemic, the structural problem of the city became absolutely apparent. And so my work shifted to understand how the structure of cities which is just like structures of families, right? So the cutoffs and the marginalization, there's certainly different rules at different levels of scale, but working with large systems is systems therapy. And so then thinking about who are the people who understand the system of the city became a great question, and then trying to understand what did they think, how do we restore cities, or how might we restore cities to sanity? And then how can we understand the ways in which the insanity of the city disables actually the whole society? So that's how Salvador Minuchin influenced my life.
Okay, fascinating. Thank you, Mindy. Okay. So let's see. Okay. Rita, let me introduce my friend, my pleasure to introduce Rita Abadi from Mount Sinai Sexual Assault and Violence Intervention, SAVI program. Abadi is the operations manager and clinician for the SAVI program at the Queens District Attorney's Office and at the New York City Family Justice Center, Queens.
So Mount Sinai SAVI is actually what we'll call a rape crisis program. And we provide psychotherapy services for survivors of sexual and domestic violence. And but also I started another program for SAVI a few years ago with commercial sexual exploitation, and I serve a lot of international sex trafficking survivors at this point. But so how this started was I'm from Brazil, and I think you can hear. And in 30 years ago, I was making the count, I was like, my God, 30 years. The government of the city of São Paulo, where I was born, they are trying to tackle the problem of child abuse. So they approached some institutions to help develop programs. And what happened at the time was we were thinking we were doing family therapy, I guess. In Brazil at the time, there was no institution yet on family therapy, but we were learning on study groups and people that had come to the US or to Italy, Milan, and have learned family therapy were coming back to Brazil and teaching us. So we got a fellowship for this group that was starting to work with child sexual and physical abuse. So that was basically structural family therapy that we're learning, but I was coming from group psychotherapy and psychodrama. And this was kind of a step forward because we were already dealing with groups and alliances and boundaries. And, so there was, the psychodrama world was the one who stepped at that point into child abuse through structural family therapy. And that's how I got to know Salvador Minuchin's work. And later, here in New York, we've met, and I did a summer intensive program with Emma, and Sal was there, so.
Nice.
That's it.
Thank you, Rita. Okay, now. Okay, it's also my pleasure to introduce Carol Shapiro. We have been colleagues and friends for a long, long time. Carol is the founder and president of Family Justice and La Bodega de la Familia. Shapiro Carol is an innovator in the field of criminal and social justice. And this has been the focus of her work for over 40 years. Now she's currently serving on the New York State Board of Parole.
Okay, well, it's a pleasure to be here. First, I have to give a disclaimer that I'm not talking about anything about my current position, but I want to say I went to my first jail at 16, largely as a passion. My mother was crushed by a drunk driver. I grew up with violence, and I would have what Sal would call resilience. And so I've spent my life going in and out of jails and prisons, but what changed my life really was this book, Working with Families of the Poor, when I was a grad student. And, and it came and went throughout my life. One of my first jobs was at Lorton Prison. And my first day at work, there were only African Americans in that prison, as you can imagine, in 1976 or 7. And this guy came up to me and he says, "What gives you the right, white bitch, to think you can do anything for me?" And you know what? Sal's words, which Emma talked about, or he talked about, was, I said, "I don't know. What do you think?" Well, that moment on, I earned the respect of the entire institution, if you can believe it. I went on in and out working in jails and prisons, government, nonprofits, and I'm going to fast forward to Rikers Island. I was a Dinkins appointment. I had to do a lot of things that I didn't believe in, like running boot camps. But one day, I had family day, and I would meet the mothers, mostly mothers and grandmothers who would come to visit. And I would say, I'd ask them how they're doing, and they say, "Well, Commissioner, I really love Jose. But, when he's home, he steals from me. I'm taking care of the kids. I don't know what to do." And that's when the light bulb started to flicker, which brings me soon to Emma. I had this idea, because I'm very passionate about wanting to keep people out of jail and prison and change our justice system writ large. I know it's a bit of hubris, and I apologize for that. But forgive me for this passion of 40 plus years. So I ended up starting a nonprofit called La Bodega de la Familia, which was to test the idea of tapping the strengths of family, neighborhood, with law enforcement. So our partners were police, probation, parole, community organizations, etc. I don't want to go into it, but I met Emma because I needed help, and all of a sudden the work of Salvador Minuchin was in my head. And I thought, I need help with creating tools. And so we developed mapping tools, and what started as a direct service morphed into national and international work to teach government, people who work in prisons, people who work in parole, probation, and police, to do the same kind of mapping. Who's important to them? Who loves you? Who can you tap? So honestly, the work of Salvador Minuchin continues to this day. I'm just not allowed to talk about it. But it's about how we tap strengths, as we talked about, and how we see people not as a series of problems to be fixed. And I think that's been particularly important with our punishment industry that rivals any other large industry we have in America. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Okay, Alberto, let me just, well, I think most of you know Alberto Minuchin. He's the executive director and founder of Equity for Children. He's professor at the graduate program in international affairs here at the New School, with a special focus on topics related to social policy, poverty, and children's rights. He worked for UNICEF as senior policy officer and in different parts of the world.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much to all of you for being here, and great to have different voices. So, I'm not trained as a family therapist. My background is in mathematics, in fact. But from there I moved to statistics, and from there I was deputy director of the Bureau of Census in Argentina, and we did the first study on poverty. And let me start a bit following him, because I was with him when they interviewed about how he started. And he started saying, well, family therapy, I will start talking about my family. I said, okay, that's a good idea. So my grandparents arrived to Argentina more than 100 years ago, 19 something, from the pogroms in Russia. And they came with 7 kids. One was the father of Salvador, and the other was the father of my father. When they arrived, the name was in Russia, so they changed. One was CH, and the other put a J, yeah? And part of the family stayed in Buenos Aires, and the other part were to a town, a small town in Entre Rios, far. In that moment, far from, now it's not so far, but in that moment was very far. So we didn't have too much contact, but in some way, my father was a pediatrician and worked in public hospital, very poor people. I used to go with him a lot. So part of my relation with children came from there. My mother was a doctor, but a psychoanalyst. She worked on a group therapy. And that's the two sides that are coming together, or not together because they divorce and they split. So it's part of the story. And in fact, I start my relation really, I know him, Sal, but I start my relation when I arrived to New York, 1999. From, I'm looking at the minutes because I said, be strict with the minutes and I will pass the minutes, but not for too much. I came in 99 and I was an alien, divorced, not knowing nothing. I thought that I know New York a lot, but the cultural shock of arriving here was tremendous. So he and Pat take care of me, yeah? He was not here, but he used to come a lot, and I start to go with my present wife, Jace, and they take Pat and Sal were a sort of role, sort of model role for us. And they used to help us as a couple coming from so different background. And I was learning with him. We discussed a lot about poverty and children. And so I want to say 3 things that I learned from him and I'm using all the time on my work. One is about identities. He said to me, you don't have one identity. There are multiple identities. Each family has different identities, and the communities have different identities. And so when I approach to my work on any of the things that we are doing on inequality, I look at the different identities. It's not one, it's different. Each one has a different possibilities, and it's multidimensional. We are multidimensional. The second thing is to challenge the official story. As you said, he used to challenge all the time to you, to anyone. So challenge the official story. There's not one story, and challenge your own story. That's the main thing. When you try to do an intervention, social intervention, the first thing that you need to challenge is yourself. You go thinking that you know something. Well, challenge yourself. Maybe you know nothing, and maybe everything is wrong. That's the second one. And the third one is what you said. You have other and multiple opportunities. You have strengths. There are problems, but on top of the problems, you can do difference, and you can do a lot of things different. And so the combination of these things, three things, I try to use in my approach. When I work on policy, advocacy, I try to use the 3 things all together. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Alberto. Okay, and with this question, the last person will be Veronica Barenstein. She's director of a clinic of working with family and couples therapy at the David Geffen School of Medicine, UCLA. Veronica is the founder and director of the Family and Couples Therapy Clinic and Training Program at the David Geffen School of Medicine in Los Angeles at UCLA. Well, I'm reading.
Same clinic, one clinic. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. They prepare the cards.
Okay.
Well.
That's the problem of the presentation.
Exactly. Where she has taught family and couples therapy to psychiatrists and psychologists for the last 20 years. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Okay. So I'm almost forgetting the question now, but I'm going to tell. The question is, how did Sal's legacy, or how did he influence you? And then I guess we have another part. I'm going to tell you only one possible story about that, because I only have 4 minutes. And we know that there are multiple possible stories. Some of you know I actually trained in New York myself. I trained at NYU in what used to be the clinical psychology PhD program. I think it died, and now it's coming back to life. That's another story. And I trained at Family Studies, which was what is now Minuchin Center with the Family Studies back then. And that's where I did my training in family therapy. So I arrived yesterday from LA because almost 20 years ago I moved to LA and to UCLA, where I teach and train. But when Alberto asked me to participate in this, I couldn't resist because I definitely feel like Minuchin and his work and all the colleagues who do that have been the biggest influence professionally in my life. And I almost feel like it's a little bit of a heresy because I trained at NYU, which is it was a very psychoanalytic program. But one of the reasons that I did that and was little known was because you started with psychoanalysis, and within a year you could also do family therapy training at the same time. Anyway, when I think what first attracted me to Minuchin's work, I think we are all, in general, when we work in this field, attracted to a way of working, a therapy theory and style that fits our style. So there must be also something in my style and my personality that made that more interesting. And I got to see some of his tapes and presentations, conferences when I was in college still. And his working style, as through the years it changed, but essentially it's a therapy of intensity, experience. It felt exciting and fast, and as I'm saying that, I think maybe that just means I'm impatient. But actually, it does take a lot of patience, because you have to choose when to intervene. You're not just jumping all over the place. So it's experiential, it's intense, but I was also attracted to his clarity of thought. Even though when you're watching him work, even in that snippet that you watched, everything seems very, there's a conversational fluidity. There was a lot of thought behind it. He was insistent that the therapies be intentional and have theory and in his way of understanding the family and conceptualizing it. And so today, when I teach, that's what I talk about with my trainees, that you have to have this understanding, even though you will develop your own style, right? I just saw the minute there. I think if I had to summarize what I still bring as the underpinnings today and how he influenced me, I think he's genuinely one of the first really holistic approaches to working with mental illness, difficulties, etc. Looking at the person, but at the person within the family, within the community, within society, and all the institutions around that. He had a real passion for teaching, and the kind of teaching that is also hands-on, knowing that you can't just teach in theory when you're working on how people relate, and it's about changing relationships. So I insist until this day in that the best way to teach that is through a one-way mirror in real time, and for that, as both a therapist and a professor, you have to be invested too, because you have to go in front of that mirror and show what you do too. And I guess to summarize, I think at the core of everything that Sal did, there was that real risk-taking and investment, okay? And I forgot to say, in 0 minutes, that his sense of social justice influenced me, and I get to talk about that maybe a little bit in the second part. So I have certainly always some colleagues who know that they can get me to participate in whatever project if it's with some underserved population or in some new way. Shh. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, yep, we finish with the first part. We will start with the second round of questions. So, Mindy, if it's okay, I will start with you again. So, the question is, how has poverty changed over these 3 decades since you trained in family therapy?
We got to propose our own second question.
Yeah.
Playing to our strengths. Thank you. So I've been working in neighborhoods and in cities for 30 years and doing all these decades of research studies. And so, and then my residency finished in 1982, and then I started doing research in 1986. So I was in the South Bronx in 1981, 1982, which was right after the implementation of the policy of planned shrinkage, which closed fire stations in the South Bronx and other poor minority neighborhoods in New York City and allowed them to burn to the ground and created absolute chaos, disseminated the AIDS epidemic, unleashed violence, addiction, maternal mortality, infant mortality went through the roof. Utter chaos, which was then aggravated by the arrival of crack with all the violence that went along with that. So when I started doing research in '86, it was in the middle of that catastrophe, which was also then not addressed as the kind of catastrophe it was. In fact, it was almost unspoken. You couldn't really speak about it as a structural problem. It was literally interdicted in many settings to say that the city had done this self-mutilation. So what's really profoundly important is that we talk about poverty and segregation as if they are reified, they are things, and they are not. The poverty of Harlem in 1950, when Salvador Minuchin started working with poor families of the area, is profoundly different from the poverty of Harlem after several decades of these kinds of assaults. Just as one statistic of hundreds, 72% of the families in Harlem were headed by two parents in 1950, but only 16% of the families were headed by two parents in 1990. This is a fundamental structural change in the nature of poverty. And it means that what families are up against if they are isolated, if instead of being part of large networks, they are on their own, especially headed by one person who's trying to keep it all together, but often in really terrifying circumstances, so unable to reach out for help, profoundly, profoundly different what poverty means. And this is underappreciated. Segregation is the same. We talk about segregation as if it's the same. It is not. Segregation is not even in the same places. So these are words that we have to interrogate and social processes that we have to interrogate. And when we can't think about the structural challenges on the shoulders of a family without thinking about the setting in which the family is trying to survive.
Thank you, Mindy. Very good questions, really. I think.
Posed a good question to myself.
No, but well, yes, that was no, but I'm saying these are important questions for us, things that we need to look at, really. It's very important because if we are working with those families, how things are so different today than they were before. Thank you. Okay, Rita. Okay. We would like to know, how have you integrated trauma work with systems theory, especially working with multiple traumas within the underprivileged communities?
It's when I'm based at the Queen's District Attorney's Office. So what that means is that a very large part of my clients are involved with the criminal justice system, on one side of the criminal justice system. And they are coming there, like usually when they are coming to see me after an assault, there is a family rupture. Statistics are that 85% of children that are abused know their abusers. For the most part, those abusers are someone that is caring for them, most likely father, stepfather, uncle, grandparents, someone that is of family trust. So what we are talking about is that when they come, when I'm starting to see children and adolescents, they are coming from a family rupture, and we are dealing with family in transition. And that, I think, is one of the most important pieces of family therapy when all these changes are happening, and so many times outside of the control of this family. Because now they are dealing not only with me, but they have criminal justice system behind them. Family court is involved. So many times child protective services are involved. We have a whole part that is forensic and trying to follow, like medical issues that can come out of these problems. So basically what I have learned to do is because, and I'm working with undocumented immigrants. Like that's my population. And we are in Queens. Queens have more, 48% of the Queens population is foreign born. So basically what I think is our main role there is to join with the family and help them understand. First, we are part of the system because we are getting, I am part of the criminal justice system, I am sitting at the DA's office and help them understand how all these systems are interacting, because it's really hard to understand what is going to happen next. One of the things that I think is the most important when I was rereading Working with the Family of the Poor, because I think I read the first edition. So I say, let me update this. And one of the things that I was reading is that the work with families is about empowering families. The work with trauma is about empowering people. We cannot do this work without empowering and actually join with the family and hear what are the solutions that they have found, what are the things that have not worked, and what are the things that they can attempt. We have to listen to what they are saying about what can help them overcome this rupture that's happening at this moment.
Thank you, Rita. Very interesting work, really, and powerful, okay? Not easy. Thank you. No. Okay, Carol.
Yes.
Okay. How does Minuchin's influence translate into our broken justice system? Okay.
Well, this seems like, I know, I wish I could talk forever, but it feels like I could weave these few things together. One is, I just want to give you one stat. I could give you lots, but about 3 million minor children have a parent behind bars. So when you consider structure, things that Mindy was talking about and Rita, this is not by accident, you know. There are neighborhoods that really bear the brunt of our incarceration, mass incarceration. And guess what? It isn't even just the justice system. It's child welfare. It is living in public housing. It's all those things. And if you only look at one part of those systems, you will never address the family or neighborhood as units. And you certainly will not get to the resilience and strengths that really exist in a lot of these communities that we have dubbed, we have labeled poor. And a disproportionate amount of our government monies are going to these communities to maintain this. And I know I'm going to be controversial here, but I have to say the helping professions are now part of our prison business. I'm talking drug treatment. I'm talking mental health. I'm talking mandated services for quote-unquote sex offenders for life. And when you think about this, think about the impact on culture, on families, and on power. And so what our broken criminal justice system, what Minuchin has to do with this is we have to shift that power. The power doesn't belong in government and social services to fix people. If we had more ways, and I think we have to start with the people who work, as Emma talked about earlier, have to start with the people who work in these fields, which is a lot of course, that's been what I've been trying to do. If you get a correctional officer and you say, what are you proudest of that you've accomplished, is very different than saying, this is the latest flavor du jour. We're going to do boot camps now, or we're going to do electronic monitoring, or whatever intrusive, invasive thing we can think of. And by the way, when you think about a parole officer or probation officer knocking on someone's door, how they treat people would make you cry. And by the way, it looks different if you're my kid. Looks very different. And so I think those are some of the threads we've been talking about, and we're using our our governmental and justice system to keep down people, and I don't think it's accidental. Thank you. Sorry, that may have been a little strong.
Yeah, you just remind me of Sal saying, we are not plumbers, we don't have to fix anything. And we train people to work with individuals or families trying to fix things as if we know better than them. And it's just the opposite, okay? They know better, so ask, find out, connect with them from a different position. Okay, Veronica, thank you, Carol. Veronica, how do you see things evolving up to now and in the future in the field of psychiatry in terms of both training and services?
Thank you.
Okay.
I forgot about the 4-minute part, so it's a long question that I asked, you know, okay. Yes, we can. Anyway, you know, I think family therapy was revolutionary when it started, since, as we all know, in the mental health field, we started with the individual and Freud famously, so family therapy was revolutionary, putting the person in context. And today it's not supposed to be revolutionary anymore, right? It's the vocabulary of family therapy has entered the everyday vocabulary of most therapists and training, and we talk about joining, and we talk about people being enmeshed and boundaries and whatever. So it's not revolutionary. Well, okay. I have an echo. Should I try a different?
Here, try.
Yeah, let me see. I thought somebody was saying smart stuff over there. Okay. What I was going to say is that I think it is still revolutionary that even though we have all of that vocabulary out there, and a lot of people say they do family therapy. I think a lot of people meet with families, but what they're doing is not necessarily what some of us who really have been trained in systems and think systemically would consider family therapy. So they do things like meet with the family and do psychoeducation. So tell them about the disorder in their kid, parent, whoever. So an individual approach, but we're psychoeducating the whole family to deal with it or work differently around it, or do collateral sessions. So when you're meeting with the child or the other person who has a problem, we will also meet with the family. And it's interesting, I really have to ask for people to clarify this because you know, I do teaching and training in family therapy and consulting to organizations. And so when they tell me, yes, we do family therapy, and then I find out that means they meet with the parents separately from the child to talk about their child and to inform them what has been done and blah, blah. So people talk as if family therapy is all around. It isn't. What I would say, and briefly, like I said, I started this clinic about 20 years ago, but I consult in different departments at UCLA. Apart from the clinic, which is outpatient, and we see all kinds of families that get referred to us, I consult in the inpatient department once a month, where they do work with the families and the social workers and the psychiatrists and the psychologists. But we still come in once a month to consult. How is this different? How can you apply some of this to an inpatient situation? I train at a place called Destinations to Recovery, which is one of the multiplying residential / to outpatient and day hospital treatments for adolescents with substance abuse and mental health issues. And so what I would find is, one, that all the services are still fragmented. If anything, I think that there are some things that have increased fragmentation. There's a lot more specialization, so a lot more clinics. We have the anxiety disorders clinic and the OCD clinic and the intense OCD clinic and the autism clinic. And so what's wonderful is we've learned a lot about different disorders, but the more we learn, the more we fragment. So the question now to me is always, so what population do you work with? And I say the population of people who are connected to families and other people. That's not what they want to hear. Okay, so, and it becomes also very manualized treatment, where it gets harder and harder to really look at what are the resources that family has and that complexity. So I find more fragmentation, also despite the fact that we have electronic records. And now the way that we're connected, and they talk about collaborating, means that you can have access to somebody else's records and you can see them. That doesn't mean you're collaborating in the sense of actually talking or sitting with the team and thinking about how are we doing this together. So what I still think is revolutionary on the one hand is, oh, one more thing. I think that there's also short-sightedness in the work in mental health and psychiatric hospitals, et cetera, in terms of training, because the training has also moved to what can we do in 3 months increments, maybe with a manual, et cetera. So, and the shift to systems thinking takes longer. So in the clinics like mine, people were able to rotate for a year. Now it's 6 months, maybe 4 months. And I can tell you, they still think it's amazing that we're looking, I'm talking about psychiatry fellows, psychology interns, it's amazing that we're looking at the case in this way and so different from everything else. And I think, yes, you still think this experience is amazing, and I know how diluted it is, right? It's just the beginning of thinking in this way. I don't know what else I was gonna say, so I got the 0, that's okay. Clearly, I think there's a lot of work still to be done. I think the collaboration has to happen, and the defragmentation at a very core level, where we see the family from the beginning. And this is not that revolutionary. I think Minuchin said it, I don't know, 30 years ago at least, 40, 50, is it 60 now? It's still a struggle, okay?
Thank you. So, keep doing that and see. Okay.
I'm still trying.
Okay.
I can tell you about a program that we're maybe developing, but.
Okay. Thank you, Veronica. Alberto. An important part of your work has been related with poverty, especially with child poverty. Can you tell us how you relate this with Sal's ideas?
Okay, I will be short, but it's great to have different voices that we are trying. So there is 2 things. One is the idea that I said before, multidimensional. So poverty was, the concept of poverty and the way of measuring poverty was income poverty. Yeah? So it's far from being multidimensional. Yeah? It's one dimension, it's one idea. And so I was working a lot on making multidimensional. There is a chapter in the book that is very interesting, that is agency, families, the multiple crises of poverty. And this is something that we are trying to look with multidimensional things, and also with this idea of deprivation and how the deprivation, one is related with the other. It's not one thing. It's one, it's the other, and it's the accumulation of things. So that's one of the things. And the other is the link between family and children. We were working a lot on child poverty and trying to say, look, the experience of being poor for a kid, for a children, is different from an adult. It's another thing. They experience and they experiment that in a very different way. And they need other things. So one time I was talking about that, and one of the person there said, look, I came from a very, very poor background, and I seldom see a poor kid without a family that is also poor and have problems. So in that moment I realized this is something wrong on what I'm saying. It's like I'm saying, let's focus on the children and forget the others. So we are not forgetting the others. We need to put everything. So sometimes, coming from the advocacy part of children, we start to say, children are 30% of the population, no one give a fuck about children, let's focus on children, Well, yeah, but children is the family, the community, is everything. So that's the other important thing that
Thank you. And I mean, that just reminded me also of this idea that giving voice to the children, hearing what they have to say, it's important. We are not used to do that. And
giving agency, one of the difficult things to explain is the idea of agency for children, yeah? Because the idea of child development is very well known, no? So the kid is small, must measure this, they became an adult and adolescent, that transition. But we said, well, children are 30% or 20% of the society. What is the voice? What they are doing in the society? Who listens at them? The school don't listen. The family don't listen. Who listens at the kids? Yeah?
Yeah. So it's exactly that's what you were saying. It's the same thing in therapy. Sometimes when the family will bring the child or the children, but still you will see that the worker is talking with the adults and the children are playing on maybe a corner and not nobody asks them, so what do you think is happening? Or there is no way in which really the workers connect and respect that the children have something to say and are part also of the solution, as we were saying before. Okay, I think that we can now maybe start with some questions and answers. Is that? Yes, okay. Oh, okay.
Thank you very much, everyone. This event was my first introduction to Salvador. And so seeing all of you talk about the experience that he's had and the impact he's had on your lives and your work is very moving, and I'm looking forward to reading more. We've been using, or you've been using, the term family, and in Mindy's comments talking about how household composition has changed, I'm sure that given the systems approach, Salvador talked about how to bring in the diversity of definitions of family into the work. Can you speak more concretely about that diversity in all its forms and thinking about how family, you know, it's not just about the single parents, but also the grandparents that care or siblings that care for each other, or I'm thinking about the situation for some young people in New York City and other places that they have parents that because of economic conditions they live in another place. How does this approach to family therapy take into account that diversity?
Okay, so I was thinking if should we take one question or a couple of questions? Couple, well, let's see, somebody else and then, okay, another one. And let's keep this first in mind, okay?
Yeah, I have a
okay.
question.
Okay. Okay, so we will take two and then answer. Yes, please.
Well, first of all, I appreciate your connection, your interest and your passion for this. Very few people have it. I'm still recovering from my own severe trauma as a child, and but I'm getting back to early childhood education after 30 years. I've been a teaching artist. I have a little video called No Adults Left Behind, where 5-year-old Dominican descent kids talk about life with more understanding than most adults. So it's a good friend, whether people lie, cheat, and fight. And if you hear the natural wisdom from a child, and if a 5-year-old can get it, like my gift to the world is everybody should get along together, people should share, everybody should help each other, people should be friends, everybody should stop fighting. Like the Emperor's New Clothes, where children can have a voice and their natural intelligence comes out like the way the kids are doing, like out of Florida now. They've done more with gun control than 35 years of politicians. Any way that you can say how children could be given a voice in this way. Social media gives everybody equality, but when it's a different point of view, the kids know instinctively what to do, and if they can get it, it might be a different way of working on adults. And I'm just curious about anything anybody might say.
Okay, okay, so thank you. So one more question and then let's see how we will start answering. Yes.
I have a question about just the definition of resilience and how it's used. I haven't read Minuchin, so I'm asking, just because I grew up in Bushwick. I was born in '86. A lot of my mother's friends, they were affected by the crack epidemic or being incarcerated or children being put in the foster care system. And I just think by our very nature of survival, we're already resilient. So I just want to know how you use your findings and your years of experience in the advocacy sector.
Thank you. So whomever would like to start answering, the first one was about diversity, families. Okay, so.
So all of them are interesting questions, and they, in some ways, they all overlap. But in terms of diversity, and I guess there's many possible stories, so I'll say a little bit, and we don't have to take ownership of the questions. Everybody can add to it. But, thank you. But what I would say is that I think even though there's been more and more of an aware of what diversity means in terms of families and just in our lives in general, from the very beginning, Minuchin's work was about diversity, right? He started, as people said, bringing therapy to people who supposedly were not apt for therapeutic intervention, right? So diversifying the field of who therapy could be for, and then really trying to develop, I think, a therapy that could be applied to anyone of any socioeconomic background and any sexual gender orientation, one, single parent or not. So actually for many years I was doing, what do they call it? That was dramatic, I can't remember. Cultural sensitivity trainings, I think, or diversity trainings for LA County. And there was always this pull, are you going to talk about working with Latinos? Are you going to talk about working with African Americans? And I said, I'm going to talk about, these are sort of the ethnographic approaches. You have to learn to work with this population and that population and that population. And while I think that the more experience you have working with all kinds of people and populations, the better and more questions arise, what I was trying to teach and what I think this approach has is a style of working that has to do with curiosity and that you can apply to anyone and find out what is their family composition, what is, who is in their network. I guess when you were asking, what I thought is, Minuchin would invite all kinds of people to sessions. In other words, the question is, who's important in your life, who's involved? So, it's your grandmother who lives, and the neighbor is the one who takes care of the kids. Well, if these are your resources, in general it's sort of 3-generational, or is the aunt and the whatever, let's invite them in, because also they're part of that system. Right, they're pulling in a different direction, or they're a resource, whoever it is. So, and the things that we look at, I think, are also gender blind and color blind, in that you're looking at boundaries and relationships and hierarchies and how people relate and who's responsible. And in some families it may be the mom, in some the dad, in some one of the dads or one of the moms, or how do they relate? What's getting them stuck? What's getting them unstuck? So. I guess that's my answer.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that one of the things, I'm just be very brief, that complicates that is the minute you have coercive government systems involved, it really doesn't matter how you see yourself. And I think that's a challenge for us as advocates wanting to change policy, because there are very strict rules. Look at public housing. People can't live when they come home from prison. It's starting to change, very difficult. So a lot of these definitions, as much as I love Minuchin's work, fall apart. They fray when you have coercive government involved. So I think we've got to I'm glad to have that optimism, but unless we change how we are framing that for people who have control over poor people, I think it's really a challenge.
Now, I think there are different issues, and that's why it's important to talk about Minuchin's legacy and the work, but then also social justice and what happened when you came up against institutions and agencies, who the agency will call as a parent, and it's a different issue, too.
It's also important that we have learned so much about trauma, and so part of what happened in the crack epidemic was incredibly traumatizing. So it just blowing people away with all the traumatic events that were happening. And so, you can't discount that. So resilience is a word that gets tossed around, in my opinion, very lightly. And it really is, all the neuropsychology that's being done right now shows that any traumatic event, whether it's physical or emotional, injures the brain, and that this has a lasting effect. There's just a report that one incident of traumatic brain injury increases the risk of dementia enormously. One. And my colleague Carl Bell looked at head trauma in his clinic and found enormously high rates of head trauma among the people there. So while we like to say everybody is resilient, and I think it's much better to understand people are stubborn and they are persistent, but there is weathering. There is wearing out of the body, and it's accelerated by these abusive things that go on because we refuse to treat all neighborhoods as if they have an equal right for people to survive. And that's why, in 1990, McCord and Freeman published a paper looking at mortality in Harlem and pointed out that a black man in Harlem had a shorter life expectancy than a man in Bangladesh, at that time the poorest nation on earth. So resilience is really overrated. We are not resilient. We weather, we wear out. And if we get beat on the head, our brains go to mush. And we can get beat on the head emotionally, and our brains go to mush. So how do we create a society that's really quite tender to people, and especially to children?
When we help them create connections.
Yes, I think you're right.
Yes, and actually, and talking about trauma, and like what is coming up a lot now is about. We have a grant now on polyvictimization, because what is scary in this part is that we know now that if someone was exposed to one kind of victimization, it higher the odds that they are going to be exposed to more. So, and when we talk about systems, and you're talking about poverty, and you're talking about child living in a violent neighborhood, even if the family is not violent, the odds that it's going to impact on personal trauma, and it's really, really, it's what is scary in terms of dealing with all these systems. So we cannot just talk about the child and the family also if we do not talk about the environment where this family is living. So otherwise we wouldn't be able to address the problems. But talking about family separation, I work with a lot of families that are separated for economic reasons. And I found it very interesting because I always ask so often I'm working with mothers or parents here, mother and father, and I ask them who they define as family members, and it could be anyone. And usually immigrants, they would include in their families the people that they end up connecting, and it's like family-like, become family because that's what you do when you are far from your family. But also what I always try to do is to help those parents understand who is the affective family of these children that are separated from their parents and have been far from them since they are 1 to 3 years old. Because one of the biggest problems we have is when there is family reunification here in the US, and that those two groups don't really know each other. So it's who is family is an important question, but sometimes different members of the same family will tell you a different family composition, and we need to be able to work with that.
Okay.
I still haven't heard anything about giving children a voice.
I was going to say that, yeah. Yeah. Do you want to address that, Alberto?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's one of the things that I work in UNICEF for a long time, and now in Equity for Children, one of the things that we said is child participation, giving voice. It's not so easy in the sense that it's a power thing, no? We are the adults. We know what is good for the children. You must remember that the legal system with children used to be that the children don't have a voice, yeah? And in many countries still, the children don't have a legal voice. They don't have so the judge is like the father. They know more than the kid what is good for the kid. So it's a cultural change in some way, and it's a power thing that need to change, and there's a lot of work around giving voice to the children.
What about YouTube and social media?
Well, social media is another thing. So they must be responsible of doing something on that, no? So it's corporation, it's social media, it's everyone that should, as I said before, they are 30% of the population. It's not a small group. But it's a challenge, because it's a challenge of power.
So I think that we are looking at the complexity of all of these issues, and there is not one solution. But what I think is that we are looking at our own responsibility of being able or to start to change things. And that's why we are here and we are starting with this dialogue. If there is not a pressing question, I think we could finish here, if that's okay with everybody. And there is some probably cheese and something over there.
We say something.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Okay.
So, only one second to first. We are hosting this event. I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank this idea of us to have different voices.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very happy because we had a very good conversation. Emma, thank you, and all the panelists, thank you very much. And let me say why we are doing this. Because when we started to think on that with Emma, the title was Honoring the Legacy of Salvador Minuchin. And in one moment we said, no, the best honor that we can do to him is taking his work forward.
Mm-hmm.
It's not honoring him, because honoring is a sort of past thing. We are looking to the, and we can see in the conversation, and that's the important thing, that we still need to do a revolution, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
And more, we are in complicated moments, so I think that this is something that calls to all of us. And as Equity for Children, I want to say that we are ready to collaborate with anyone, and we can looking for new ideas. As I said to someone, this is a new area, because we are trying to put together people working on advocacy of children, policy for children, and people working on family therapy and children's and poor children's, but we don't talk many times. And as you said, it's the first time that you listen about Salvador Minuchin. How many years that you are working with children's, with communities, participatory approach, yeah? And it's the first time that you listen about him. And the opposite is exactly the same. So, thank you very much for being here. There is some cheese, and thank you. And